Our wonderful human imagination not only creates, but it sustains all of our experiences. It can create health, wealth, abundance, but what about relationships? Can consciously imagining bring us true love? Can it sustain or even repair a broken marriage? In today's video, I will be reading an excerpt from The Magic of the Mind by Louise Berlay. Here we will see how, by the use of imagination, not only was a broken marriage reconciled, but true love was allowed to blossom again. Secrets of the Heart. Marlena saw her marriage in seriously troubled waters. What had happened to all the sweetness and caring that had so enriched their lives? Where had the laughter gone and the playfulness when her husband used to tease her and pick her up and swing her around? Mark no longer did those things. He was a changed man. He had grown selfish, she thought, and insensitive as to her needs and pleasures. No, he was not the wonderful man she had married. Their household was extremely stressed, and their 3 children reacted to the tense atmosphere in unruly and chaotic behavior. It had become a vicious circle. Where would it end? She saw her frustrations in them and knew that their poor performance in school was due to the extreme unhappiness at home. Both she and Mark were disenchanted with one another, even deeply resentful, and she knew that each felt strongly that their love had died as a result of the other's fault. From Mark's point of view, he spent his life supporting a family from whom he hadn't the least appreciation or consideration. He felt he was taken for granted as a provider and nothing more. He looked for excuses to come home late. There was no pleasure in having dinner with the family. Marlena only nagged and complained, and the children had become unruly brats. Not a pretty sight. Marlena knew, but chose not to think about the fact that divorce was looming on the horizon. Yes, she was resentful. She had a promising career when they were married, but she had been relegated to a cook, housekeeper, scrubwoman, mistress, shopper, and limousine service. And there was more. She had no time for herself, no way to grow, no sense of reward, consideration, or fulfillment. She had been had by life, and she was bitter. Mark showed her no affection unless he wanted to make love, and then it wasn't love, just a sexual release. Yes, to be sure, she had lost all interest in the bedroom. To Mark, Marlena was no longer the girl he had married. She was unrecognizable. He thought of how eager she had been and how she was more likely to be the one to initiate their lovemaking. He compared this to their last intimacy when he was about to enter the gates of paradise. She announced matter-of-factly, "You forgot to drop off your suits at the cleaners." With these distracting words, Mark had removed himself to the den, where he had slept for the last 6 months or more. One day, Mark came home late from the office and tossed a large envelope on the table with the announcement. "We both know this marriage is on the rocks. I've had our attorney drop the divorce papers. You will have the house, your car, and money for child support. I want out." Marlena knew that the marriage was on the rocks, but she wasn't prepared for the shock of confronting it face to face. What would happen to the children? What and how could she tell them? How would they react to such a tearing and traumatic separation? Wouldn't they blame her? If not now, then surely later on. Undoubtedly, they would suffer the most. That was the usual scenario, was it not? She felt traumatized. She couldn't speak. Each felt let down. Their marriage vows had not been honored, and each was convinced that the blame lay at the feet of his partner. Both suffered, but there was no communication, and their emotions continued to erode. Every evening, Mark asked if she had signed the divorce papers. Marlena, experiencing shock, resentment, and bitterness, remained silent. She could not bring herself even to open the envelope. Bad as things were, she felt that the divorce would be even more intolerable. One mid-morning, Mark called to say that the attorney had gotten a court date for a hearing and asked her to sign the papers as this was delaying the formalities. The next morning, as he was leaving, he asked for the signed document. She was too confused to answer. The days wore on with no communication between them. It was all too painful. Their beautiful dream had become a nightmare. What could be more dead than a love which had died? There was no affection in the home. The children became more and more unruly as the stresses in the home mounted. Now there were notes from their teachers that 9-year-old Melinda and 7-year-old Roger were disturbing their classes and were not studying. Would she come to the school and meet with the teachers and the principal? Marlena went, but matters became worse instead of better. She didn't know where to turn, and she was too embarrassed to tell their friends. She sat on the couch in a stupor. She had no appetite and felt weak and haggard. Mark had constant indigestion and kept popping pills in hope of relief. Never, never again, he thought. If he ever got out of this marriage trap, would he consider losing his freedom for the heavy encumbrances of a family? He thought of the lightness and unobstructed freedom that he enjoyed before saddling himself with the heavy responsibilities of a family. Why had he not waited? He should have lived more before settling down. Now his feet were as lead. He was tied and bound for at least another 15 years when little Roger, now 7, would be in college. He wondered how many men were in the same situation and saw no way out but divorce, although he knew that this would not really resolve the problem. There was the matter of dividing their community property, the problem of financing 2 homes, visitation rights, and the complications of possible estrangement from the 2 children. The marriage structure must be changed, he thought. It does not answer the needs of the individual members, and the stresses are too high. Who could survive it? A month had passed, and still Marlena had not signed the papers. Mark no longer came home for dinner. He hardly saw the children as they were in bed when he returned home. He might have a glimpse of them in the morning, but there was no contact, no warmth. He loved his children and was torn between living in the present misery and living apart from them. How could such a dilemma be resolved? One morning, as Mark left the house, Marlena turned on the TV to distract her confused emotions. On Channel 9 at 7:30 a.m., a program called There Is a Way was just starting. The title caused her to linger. Dr. Dale Betzold of Palm Springs introduced a guest who spoke about creating sound relationships. How she hoped there might be some answer to her problem. She listened for the half hour, but at the end, she was in such turmoil that she could not recall what was said. Yet she felt a bit of relief. She then became a regular viewer, and day by day she gained further clarity as she listened to a different guest 5 mornings a week. To her, this was a lifesaver. Here she found information and advice that she could use in a very practical sense. From the various guests, she began to broaden her perspective and see some of her own responsibility for the chaos in the family. Day by day, she pieced together the causes of the present conditions and concluded that, either by commission or omission, she had contributed greatly to the family dilemma. She came to feel that it was the wife who should be the homemaker, especially if she remained in the home, and she saw that she had not acted intelligently in organizing her myriad of chores. Trying to muddle through with no order left her no time for herself, and she felt relegated to a life of the most boring and wearying enslavement. With this attitude, she could be neither a good wife or mother, and instead of benefiting her family, she had created an unattainable atmosphere where everyone was miserable. She now began to see that she had been unaware of Mark's needs. So busy was she thinking of her own. From the program, she learned of the enormous importance of sending a husband off to work in the morning with a bright smile and a hug to make him feel appreciated and motivated in order to meet the challenges of the day. She saw that she had been greatly remiss in showing no sign of attention when he left in the mornings. She had been too busy complaining about her lot in life to notice that his life was far from a bed of roses, yet she showed him little or no concern. One day after the program, Marlena sat contemplating upon what she had heard and thinking of how she could put this into practice in her own life. She drifted into a kind of reverie in which she experienced, in imagination, a beautiful and ideal life with Mark and their children. She became lost in her vision and was unaware when it had endured for over an hour. Most importantly, she felt a wonderful lightness in her mind and heart. Her mind was much clearer, and she felt so benefited by her unwitting adventure into the ideal that she resolved to continue the practice daily. At the end of the week, she was astonished at the clarity and inner peace that she was feeling after so short a time. With her new discipline of creative imagination, she now lived in the world of her choice. She saw the children healthy, happy, and developing normally. She experienced in the silence of her mind the wonder they used to feel and relived its light and happy moments, its laughter and playfulness. At the end of only 2 weeks of this new practice, she saw reflected in the children an improvement in their behavior. They seemed calmer and less angry. Mark was still not coming home to dinner, and there was no communication between them. Marlena, recognizing her ignorance and allowing their family life to decline to such a devastating condition, determined that she would restore it to its original health and harmony. She would make every effort to regain Mark's love. She would think only of giving and not at all of getting. She knew that she must empty some of her bitter cup before goodness could refill it. Without a word to anyone, she set about looking after the children with love and open affection. She bought a book on household organization and learned to so order her life that she now cooked only every other day. She made a week's list of menus at a time and shopped accordingly. Now that she was free most of 3 days a week, she found she had time to go to the library, to lunch with her friends, and enjoy some long-needed leisure. Though she did not talk with Mark openly, they communicated beautifully in her imaginary conversations. She now cooked the food he liked and served it with soft glances in his direction. He seemed curious as to what had caused the change he observed in her, but was not comfortable to ask. Within a month of her silent practice, she knew she would win Mark back and renew the harmony in the family. Soon he began to talk to the children in their presence and showed an interest in their lives. Little by little, brief questions or remarks were exchanged between them. He still occupied the den, but she detected a slight thawing in his attitude. The children received the report cards, and she noted that their marks were up slightly over the last grading period. She encouraged them and praised them in their father's presence. She noticed how her compliments and affections lifted their spirits, and they showed new signs of wanting to please her as well. She was invited to become an officer in the school PTA, which she cheerfully accepted. The children seemed very pleased that their mother now took an active part in their school. She joined a women's club as well and attended a weekly meeting at the library. Her mind was filled with interesting new growth projects, and life, again, had meaning. Marlena suggested to Mark that he might find pleasure in joining some men's club. He looked into the matter and chose one. And he resumed the golf that he had abandoned. Still, there had been no open reconciliation between them. But now that each of them had added new interests to their lives, there was more to share. Continuing her daily discipline of creative silent time had completely changed her views and attitudes. She felt and looked as a new person. She reflected over her seemingly chance discovery of There Is a Way, and how the engaging Dr. Betzel and his interesting guests had helped her to find her way. She became a faithful and active follower and participant. Though Mark didn't know it, she would tell him one day that this is what had brought about the change in her and the priceless benefits to their children. Where once she had been at rock bottom, she now felt that she was close to the top of her climb back to emotional health and happiness. Encouraged and inspired, she continued to rehearse a variety of scenes and activities which in her mind she and Mark enjoyed together. She practiced greeting him at the door with a cheerful hug and kiss as he left or arrived, asking about his day, offering him some light refreshment. Sitting with him for a cozy chat before dinner, she told him nice or amusing things that the children had said or done, and of her interest and pleasure in her new activities. She imagined that they again enjoyed snuggling in bed together, that there was a bond of tenderness and warmth between them, that they showed open affection before the children. She saw him as attentive and loving parent that she had recently become. She knew that her inner practice was showing in her very presence and in all that she did. She was aware that he watched her in silence, trying to understand the tremendous change he saw and felt in her. He did not ask, and she did not offer any explanation, feeling that deeds were more eloquent than words. Already a few months had passed, and although Mark's response had very noticeably thawed, spring had not yet sprung. But Marlena was certain that it was just around the corner and would soon be in full bloom. She groomed herself with the meticulous care of their dating days and treated him with warmth, courtesy, and grace. Instead of retreating to his den, Mark now sat with the family and watched television or helped the children with their homework. He was not talkative, but he appeared to be more and more comfortable. She knew that he was waiting to see if her new manner would last. She resolved that it would. One day, Mark came home with flowers. He did not offer them to her, but put them in a vase himself and set them on the coffee table. Marlena remarked that they were beautiful and smiled her pleasure. A couple of weeks later, he bought her a book that he said she would enjoy. She soon realized that it was a love story, and she knew that he too was thinking of the two of them in its happy ending. Still, he did not approach her. There had been no touching for almost a year. She chose not to intrude into his emotions, but rather to be loving and attentive and allow him to initiate some gesture of desire for her again. One evening, Mark brought home a videocassette of a film that he had seen during their estrangement and put it on the VCR after the children went to bed. It was a beautiful story with a tender and happy ending which brought tears to Marlena's eyes. She rose to find a tissue. Mark followed, drawing her to him and holding her firmly and lovingly in his arms. Marlena's soft weeping erupted into sobs. So much emotion had passed between them, so many hurts, so much resentment, so many errors in judgment, both stumbling in the darkness of not knowing. He had had no one with whom he felt comfortable to talk. All remained pent up in his disheartened emotions. How painfully both had suffered. Now she knew that it was all self-made. Mark was as deeply moved. She felt a tear on his cheek as he dried her eyes with his handkerchief. When she could, Marlena whispered, "Forgive me," and he answered, "Please forgive me too. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what it was or what to do about it. Thank God you brought us back together." Mark kissed her forehead, her eyelids, her cheeks, and ever so tenderly her lips. That night he moved from the den back to their bedroom. Both had learned that love and beauty are the byproducts of selfless giving to others. This story beautifully illustrates how, by exercising her imagination and persisting in an assumption, love and happiness was achieved. Because with imagination, all things are possible. Want to get help in relationship matters or get into the heart of what might be sabotaging your manifestations? Then why not check out our team of imagination coaches over at Truecosmic Academy? The link is provided in the comments section below. You can also find a link to the book Magic of the Mind by Louise Berlay once again in the comments section. We hope you enjoyed today's video. Remember to hit the like button and subscribe for future videos.